The explosion lit up the entire Kepler system. For 3 seconds, there were 2 stars where there had been 1. The bioship that the Ragnarok had struck simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energies that could melt planets. The shockwave hit Elena's ship a moment later, throwing everyone against their restraints. Alarm screamed as systems overloaded, but when the sensors cleared, Elena saw something beautiful. The remaining bioships were retreating. For the first time since the battle began, the creatures looked afraid. They felt pain, Elena realized. Real pain. They can adapt to weapons, but they can't adapt to raw destruction on that scale. The enemy fleet pulled back to a safer distance, clearly reconsidering their approach. Elena used the respite to coordinate the evacuation. More transport ships launched from Kepler Colony, packed with civilians. "Colony, what's your status?" Elena called. The woman's voice came back, stronger now. "We've got 300,000 people off-world and climbing. The children are safe aboard the first transports. But we still have over 1 million people on the surface." Elena nodded grimly. They had bought time, but not enough. The bioships were already beginning to advance again, more cautious but still inexorable. Then her communications officer looked up with surprise. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from multiple Garden World fleets. They're entering the system." Elena's blood ran cold. Admiral Thessarian had finally gotten his ships moving, but they were not coming to help with the evacuation. As the Garden World vessels dropped out of hyperspace, they moved to surround the Deathworlder fleet. "Attention Deathworlder vessels," Admiral Thessarian's voice boomed across all channels. "You are ordered to stand down immediately and surrender for violations of the protective protocols. The unauthorized deployment of prohibited weapons ends now." Elena stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The bioships were still advancing toward the colony. People were still dying, and Admiral Thessarian was more worried about regulations than lives. "Admiral," Elena replied, "in case you haven't noticed, we're in the middle of evacuating civilians from hostile aliens. This is not the time for politics. Captain Vasquez, you have violated every treaty the Confederation holds sacred. The weapons you have deployed pose a threat to galactic stability. I cannot allow you to continue this rampage." Elena felt something snap inside her chest. Rampage. He was calling the rescue of children a rampage. "Admiral, those prohibited weapons just saved 300,000 lives, and we're going to save more before this is over." "Negative," Admiral Thessarian replied. "Garden World diplomatic vessels are now handling the evacuation. Deathworlder ships will withdraw immediately or face consequences." Elena looked at her sensors. The Garden World diplomatic vessels were luxury cruisers with minimal cargo space. They could maybe evacuate a few thousand people. The rest would be left behind. "Admiral, your ships cannot carry the remaining civilians. They will die if we leave them." Admiral Thessarian's response was cold and final. "Some losses are acceptable. The greater good requires that we prevent Deathworlders from accessing weapons of mass destruction. The protective protocols exist for good reasons." Elena closed her eyes. There it was again. Acceptable losses. The greater good. The same words Garden Worlders always used when they wanted to sacrifice other people's children. "I see," Elena said quietly. "So when children were singing as monsters approached their world, you called that acceptable. When we risked our lives to save them, you called that illegal. When we succeeded where you failed, you called that dangerous." She opened her eyes and looked directly into the camera. Her words were being broadcast to every ship in the system, including the civilian transports. "Let me tell you what I think is acceptable, Admiral. I think it's acceptable for dangerous Deathworlders to break unjust laws. I think it's acceptable for soldiers to disobey orders when those orders would let children die. And I think it's acceptable for people who were forged by hard worlds to be exactly as hard as they need to be." Elena stood up from her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew watched with fierce pride. "For 200 years, you've treated us like attack dogs on leashes. You've limited our ships, restricted our weapons, and called it protection. You've used us when you needed violence done, then pushed us aside when the real decisions were made." Elena's voice carried across every ship in the system. Garden Worlders listened with growing unease. Standard Worlders heard her words and thought of their own grievances. And Deathworlders felt something they had not experienced in generations. Hope. But when extinction came calling, where were your advanced Garden World fleets? Where were your superior diplomatic solutions? Where were the shepherds when their flock cried for help? On the colony world below, Elena knew people were listening. parents holding their children, teachers comforting their students, all of them wondering if they would live through the next hour. "We didn't ask to be born on worlds that wanted to kill us," Elena continued. "We didn't choose to be forged in fire and shaped by survival. But when the galaxy truly needed protectors, when innocent people faced horrors beyond imagination, who stood in the breach?" Elena paused, letting the question hang in the vacuum of space. "The same dangerous Deathworlders you've spent centuries trying to control." Admiral Thessarian's face appeared on screen again. He looked pale and angry. "Captain Vasquez, you are committing treason against the lawful authority of the Confederation. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." Elena smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, I have something to show you." She activated a program from the Cerberus protocol. Across the galaxy, hidden monitoring stations began broadcasting intercepted communications, secret messages between Garden World leaders, discussions about the Deathworlder problem, plans to reduce their populations through selective non-intervention. The most damning recording was Admiral Thessarian's own voice, speaking to the Council of Shepherds 3 months earlier. "The situation with the unknown aliens could resolve several of our long-term concerns. If we allow them to eliminate some of the more problematic Deathworlder colonies, we could significantly reduce the threat these species pose to galactic stability." The silence that followed was deafening. Every ship in the system had heard the recording. The Garden Worlders had known about the threat for months. They had deliberately allowed it to reach Deathworlder colonies, hoping it would reduce their populations. Elena's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You knew. You knew children would die, and you let it happen. You thought you could use these creatures to solve your political problems." Admiral Thessarian tried to respond, but his words were lost in the storm of outrage from his own fleet. Garden World crews were horrified by what they had heard. Many of them had friends among the Deathworlders. Some of them had family on the threatened colonies. "The old hierarchy is dead," Elena declared. "You can rule over Garden Worlds and Standard Worlds as you please. But the Deathworlder Compact is withdrawing from the Confederation. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will defend those who are abandoned by their shepherds, and we will ensure that never again will children's cries go unanswered, because they're deemed strategically insignificant." The battle that followed was brief and decisive. Most of the Garden World fleet refused to fight. Their crews had heard too much, learned too much about what their leaders really thought of civilian lives. The bioships made one final attempt to reach Kepler Colony, but they found themselves facing weapons they could not adapt to. Deathworlder ingenuity had created exotic particles that existed outside normal spacetime. Dimensional bombs that destroyed targets in multiple realities simultaneously, weapons that turned the creature's own adaptive abilities against them. Within hours, the alien threat was eliminated. The evacuation of Kepler Colony was completed successfully. 2,300,000 people were saved, including every single child. Elena stood on the observation deck of her ship, looking down at the rebuilt Kepler Colony 5 years later. The memorial at its center bore the names of every Deathworlder who had died in the battle. Captain Sarah Chen's name was at the top, followed by the crews of 17 other ships that had made the ultimate sacrifice. At the base of the memorial, a simple message was carved in stone. They heard the children cry, and they came. Elena smiled as she watched human children playing in the colony's gardens. They were safe now. They were all safe, protected by ships that patrolled the dark spaces between stars, ships crewed by people who understood that some things were worth fighting for. The Deathworlder Compact had grown beyond Elena's wildest dreams. Dozens of species had joined them, all united by a simple principle: the strong protect the weak. Their fleets kept watch on the galaxy's frontiers, their sensors always listening for distress calls, their weapons ready for threats that would make Garden Worlders flee in terror. Elena heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Admiral Kex approaching. The small Zalani commander looked tired but satisfied. "The Vorthak have identified 3 more bioship swarms in adjacent galaxies," Kex reported. "They appear to be heading this way." Elena nodded. The threat was not over. It might never be over. But that was all right. News of Admiral Chen's unauthorized mission spread across human space like wildfire. Within 6 hours, every major news network was broadcasting the story. Politicians on Earth were furious. Military commanders were worried. But something unexpected happened among regular people. They supported her. Recruitment stations across human colonies suddenly filled with volunteers. Not just soldiers, everyone wanted to help. Engineers quit their jobs to join repair crews. Doctors left comfortable hospitals to treat alien patients they had never seen. Even teenagers lied about their ages to try to enlist. On Mars Colony, Captain Marcus Torres watched the chaos from his ship's bridge. The Indomitable was humanity's newest assault carrier, built to fight in the worst conditions space could offer. His crew was already aboard, preparing for the jump to Zalari space. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we're getting hundreds of requests from people wanting to join us. Civilians mostly." "What kind of civilians?" "Medical teams, construction workers, teachers who want to help Zalari children, even some families who want to adopt orphans." Torres shook his head in amazement. Only humans would see a war zone and think about adoption. "Tell them we appreciate the offer, but this is a military operation." But even as he said it, Torres knew this was bigger than just military action. This was humanity showing its true nature to the galaxy for the first time. Reports flooded in from intelligence networks across known space. Other alien species were watching humanity's response with confusion and fear. Most civilizations took months to decide on military action. Humans had mobilized a fleet in less than a day. The Galactic Council sent angry messages to Earth, demanding that humans stop interfering in conflicts outside their territory. Earth's government tried to recall Admiral Chen's fleet, but they had already jumped to hyperspace. On the planet Zerion, the Altarian delegation watched human news broadcasts with growing alarm. Ambassador Kenthvar turned to his aide with worried eyes. "These humans," he said, "they're not acting rationally. No species sends their military to save strangers. What do they gain from this?" His aide checked the reports again. "According to our analysis, nothing. The Zalari have no valuable resources. Their technology is inferior to human standards. There's no strategic advantage to helping them. Then why are they doing it?" The aide hesitated. "Our xenobiologists believe it's because humans evolved on what they call a death world. Their planet was so dangerous that they developed unusual emotional responses to help their species survive." Ambassador Kenthvar looked confused. "What kind of emotional responses?" "They form bonds with creatures they've never met. They feel pain when strangers suffer. Our scientists think it's a survival trait that helped them work together against their planet's many dangers. That sounds like a weakness that other species could exploit. That's what we thought too. But look at what they're doing now. 37 warships, fully armed and ready to fight an empire that outnumbers them 50-1, all because they heard strangers crying for help." The ambassador was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps we've misunderstood what makes a species strong." On Earth, the government held emergency meetings. General Morrison paced back and forth in the war room, yelling at anyone who would listen. "Chen has lost her mind. We can't fight the Vorthak Empire. They have over 500 ships. Our intelligence says they've been conquering worlds for 3 centuries. President Martinez looked tired. She had been in office for 2 years and had never faced anything like this. "Can we recall the fleet?" "They're in hyperspace. We can't reach them until they arrive at the target system." "What are our options when they get there?" General Morrison pulled up tactical displays. "Honestly, they'll probably all die. The Vorthak have superior numbers, proven tactics, and experience. Our people are brave, but bravery doesn't stop plasma cannons." "Unless," interrupted Dr. Elizabeth Grant, Earth's leading xenobiologist. She had been quiet during most of the meeting, studying reports about both the Vorthak and the humans preparing to fight them. "Unless what, Doctor?" asked President Martinez. "Unless being a Death Worlder gives our people advantages we haven't considered." Dr. Grant brought up her own displays, showing Earth's environment compared to other known worlds. "Look at these numbers. Earth's gravity is 40% higher than average for inhabited worlds. Our atmosphere is more corrosive. Our radiation levels would kill most aliens in hours. Our weather systems are more violent than anything most species have ever seen." "What does that mean for our military?" asked the president. "It means our people are adapted to survive in conditions that would destroy other species. Our ships are built to handle stresses that would tear apart normal vessels. Our soldiers can operate in environments that most aliens consider impossible." General Morrison looked skeptical. "The Vorthak aren't most aliens. They're conquerors. They're used to fighting." "Yes, but they've never fought Deathworlders before." Meanwhile, Admiral Chen's fleet raced through hyperspace toward the Zalari system. On every ship, crews prepared for battle in their own way. Some prayed. Others wrote letters to families back home. Many just did their jobs and trusted their training. Captain Lisa Park sat in her fighter cockpit aboard the carrier Defiant. Her ship, the Banshee, was an experimental design built to operate in the worst possible conditions. It could fly through radiation storms, handle extreme gravitational fields, and keep working even with major system damage. Banshee Squadron, she called to her pilots. Remember what we learned in training. Most alien fighters can't handle the maneuvers we consider normal. Use that advantage. Captain, came a voice over the radio. What if the Vorthak have better weapons than us? Then we'll get close enough that weapons don't matter. Humans are good at improvising. On the troop transport Resilient, Sergeant Major Rodriguez briefed his Marines. These were soldiers trained to fight in any environment. Vacuum, poison atmospheres, extreme temperatures, crushing gravity. They wore armor that could keep them alive anywhere. Listen up, Rodriguez told his troops. We're going up against an enemy that's been conquering worlds since before Earth had cities. They think they know everything about warfare. They've never met us before. That's their mistake. Private Johnson raised her hand. Sergeant, what makes us different from all the other species the Vorthak have defeated? Rodriguez smiled grimly. Son, those other species evolved on nice, safe worlds with gentle weather and friendly animals. We evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. Every day on Earth was survival training. These Vorthak are about to learn what that means. Dr. Sarah Kim worked in her laboratory, studying everything known about Vorthak biology and culture. She wanted to understand the enemy not just to help defeat them, but to figure out how to help them after the war ended. Interesting, she muttered, looking at intelligence reports. The Vorthak conquest pattern shows they target the weakest worlds first, then use those resources to attack stronger ones. They avoid any system that might fight back effectively. Her assistant looked over her shoulder. Does that tell us something useful? It tells us they're bullies. Bullies usually fold when someone punches back hard enough. But Kim was also looking at reports about Vorthak homeworlds. They were overcrowded with limited resources. They're not conquering because they're evil, she realized. They're conquering because they're desperate. That might be important later. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalari system and immediately detected massive Vorthak forces. Over 200 ships surrounded the inner planets, bombarding cities and hunting down fleeing civilians. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We're outnumbered 6-1 by an enemy that has never lost a major battle. Our mission is to save innocent people from genocide. I won't lie to you, many of us probably won't make it home. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. But we're humans. We don't give up when the odds are bad. We fight harder. Today, the galaxy is going to learn what Deathworlders can do when they're angry. The human fleet accelerated toward the inner system, weapons charging and fighters launching. Behind them, they left emergency beacons broadcasting a message back to Earth. If we don't survive this battle, Admiral Chen had recorded, tell our families we died doing what humans do best, protecting those who can't protect themselves. On Zalari Prime, Elder Zethka felt the ground shake as orbital bombardments continued. But his radio operators were picking up new signals, human battle communications filled with determination and anger. They really came, he whispered to his people. These humans heard us crying and traveled across the galaxy to help us. A young Zalari looked up at him with large, frightened eyes. Will they save us? Elder Zethka listened to the radio chatter. Human voices, calm and professional, coordinating attacks against impossible odds. These were not the voices of people who expected to lose. I don't know if they can save us, he said, but they're going to try, and that's more than anyone else in the galaxy was willing to do. The battle for the Zalari system was about to begin. The Vorthak response was swift and brutal. War Commander Thaskvor watched the human fleet approach on his tactical screens and laughed. 37 small ships against his armada of 200. These humans must be insane. All ships, he commanded. Destroy these fools before they can interfere with the harvest. The Vorthak fleet fired everything at once. Hundreds of plasma beams lit up space like a deadly light show. Any normal military force would have been vaporized instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships scattered in directions that made no sense. Some dove toward the system's binary stars, flying straight into radiation that should have killed their crews. Others headed for the asteroid belt, using the floating rocks as cover while enemy fire melted boulders around them. "What are they doing?" demanded Task Force. "No ship can operate in those radiation zones." His tactical officer checked the sensors again. "Commander, they're not just operating, they're accelerating. And their crews are still alive." Impossible. But it was happening. Captain Lisa Park led her fighter squadron through the radiation shadow of Kepler 442's twin stars. The area was so dangerous that Vorthak ships wouldn't follow. Most alien pilots would die from exposure in minutes. Park's pilots were not most aliens. "Banshee Squadron, remember your training," she called over the radio. "Earth's sun throws worse radiation than this at us every day. Use the interference to mask your approach." Her fighters emerged behind the Vorthak fleet like ghosts. The enemy had been looking the wrong way, expecting humans to behave like normal, rational species that avoided dangerous areas. "Banshee lead to all fighters," Park announced calmly. "Weapons free. Show these bullies what happens when they pick on innocent people." The human fighters struck like lightning. Their weapons were not more powerful than Vorthak guns, but they attacked from impossible angles. Park's squadron had trained to fight in Earth's violent weather storms, dodging lightning and flying through hurricanes. Flying around confused enemy ships was easy by comparison. On his command ship, Task Force watched his tactical display with growing alarm. His fleet was designed to overwhelm weak opponents with superior firepower. These humans were not cooperating with his strategy. "They're not fighting like a proper military," he snarled. His aide looked nervous. "What do you mean, Commander?" "Look at their formation patterns. No discipline. No standard tactics. They're flying around like wild animals." What Task Force didn't understand was that humans had learned warfare from Earth's most dangerous predators. They hunted in packs, used terrain to their advantage, and never attacked the same way twice. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her command ship and smiled grimly. The Vorthak were good at conquering peaceful worlds, but they had never fought people who considered warfare an art form. "Captain Torres," she called to the Indomitable, "take your assault teams and show these bullies what human Marines can do." "With pleasure, Admiral." Torres commanded the most dangerous soldiers in human space. These Marines were trained to fight in any environment. Airless moons, poison gas clouds, crushing gravity, extreme temperatures. They wore armor that let them survive anywhere, and carry weapons designed to work in the worst possible conditions. The Indomitable launched dozens of assault pods toward the largest Vorthak ships. The pods were too small and fast for enemy guns to track effectively. They struck the enemy hulls like hammers and cut through the metal with tools designed to work in the volcanic mines of Jupiter's moons. Sergeant Major Rodriguez led the first boarding team through the breach. The Vorthak ship's interior was dark and filled with thick, humid air that would choke most species. Rodriguez and his Marines didn't even slow down. "Spread out," he ordered. "Remember, we're not here to destroy the ship. We want prisoners to question." The Vorthak crew had never faced boarders who could operate in their ship's toxic atmosphere without special equipment. They had certainly never fought soldiers who moved through their corridors like hunting cats, using darkness and smoke as advantages instead of obstacles. The first Vorthak warrior Rodriguez encountered was 7 feet tall with thick armor and razor claws. It roared a challenge and charged, expecting to intimidate the smaller human. Rodriguez sidestepped the attack and used the alien's momentum to send it crashing into a wall. "You picked the wrong species to bully," he said, then called to his medic. "Doc, get over here." "This one's unconscious but breathing. We need to keep it alive for questioning." That was when the Vorthak learned something that shocked them more than human fighting ability. These Deathworld soldiers actually cared about enemy wounded. Dr. Sarah Kim had insisted on coming with the boarding parties. She wanted to study Vorthak biology, but she also wanted to try communicating with them. When Rodriguez's team brought her the first unconscious prisoner, she immediately began medical treatment. "Doctor," Rodriguez said, "this thing was trying to kill us 5 minutes ago." "I know," Kim replied, checking the alien's vital signs. "But maybe if we show them we're different from their usual enemies, we can learn something useful." The captured Vorthak warrior regained consciousness slowly. It expected to be tortured or killed, as was normal practice in galactic warfare. Instead, it found itself in what looked like a medical facility, with a strange alien tending its wounds. "Who are you?" It growled in its own language. Kim's translation software kicked in. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim. I'm trying to help you. Can you understand me?" The Vorthak stared at her in confusion. "You're healing me. Why?" "I am your enemy. Because you're hurt and I'm a doctor. That's what doctors do." This conversation was being recorded and broadcast to the Vorthak fleet. War Commander Thaskvor listened in growing bewilderment. "They're treating our warriors as patients?" he asked his aide. "Yes, Commander. And they're asking questions about our culture and our homeworld, not military information. They want to know about our families, our food, why we need to conquer other worlds." Thaskvor was trained to understand enemies who fought for territory, resources, or power. These humans seemed to fight for principles he didn't recognize. The battle continued for hours, but the pattern was clear. Human ships operated in areas that Vorthak vessels couldn't reach. Human fighters attacked from angles that conventional tactics said were impossible. Human marines boarded enemy ships and captured rather than killed their opponents. Most confusing of all, human medics treated Vorthak wounded with the same care they gave their own people. On the surface of Zalari Prime, the ground fighting was equally strange. Vorthak soldiers had been herding civilian populations toward extermination, centers when human drop pods began landing near the killing grounds. The pods opened to reveal human soldiers in full environmental armor, carrying weapons that worked perfectly in Zalari's thin atmosphere and high gravity. But instead of attacking the Vorthak positions directly, they did something unexpected. They rescued civilians first. Lieutenant Sarah Banks led her squad straight into a group of terrified Zalari families. The tall, deer-like aliens cowered when they saw more armed soldiers, expecting to be shot. Instead, Banks knelt down to speak to a young Zalari child who was crying. "Hey there," she said gently, her helmet's speakers translating into Zalari language. "My name is Sarah. We're here to help you. Can you walk?" The child nodded, too scared to speak. "Good. I want you to take your family and go that way." Banks pointed toward a safe area behind human lines. "My friends will protect you. You're going to be okay now." Elder Zethka witnessed this scene from his hiding place and felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. These humans weren't just fighting the Vorthak. They were saving his people. As the battle raged, more human reinforcements continued arriving. The volunteers who had insisted on coming brought medical supplies, food, and equipment to help rebuild destroyed cities. They set up refugee camps with remarkable efficiency. Dr. Chen Kim worked with captured Vorthak officers and made a discovery that would change everything. Through careful questioning, she learned that the Vorthak Empire wasn't expanding because they enjoyed conquest. They were expanding because they were starving. "Commander Thaskvor," she said during one interrogation session, "your homeworlds are overcrowded, aren't they? Too many people, not enough resources." The Vorthak commander glared at her. "You know nothing about our struggles, human. I know that desperate people do desperate things. My own species almost destroyed itself fighting over resources before we learned to work together. Your point? My point is that there might be a better way than genocide. What if we could help your people find new worlds to live on without killing the current inhabitants?" Thaskvor laughed bitterly. "Impossible. The galaxy has no room for us. The galaxy has no room for you on the nice, comfortable worlds that other species prefer," Kim corrected. "But humans know how to live on worlds that everyone else thinks are uninhabitable. Maybe we could teach your people the same skills." For the first time since the battle began, Thaskvor looked uncertain rather than angry. The tide of battle was turning in humanity's favor, but Admiral Chen knew this was just the beginning. Defeating the Vorthak fleet was only the first step. The real challenge would be figuring out how to prevent future wars. "All ships," she broadcast, "secure your sectors and prepare for Phase 2. 3 days after the battle ended, Admiral Chen sat in a temporary command center on Zalari Prime. Around her, human engineers worked alongside Zalari survivors to repair damaged buildings and restore power systems. The cooperation was remarkable, considering the two species had never met before the crisis. Dr. Sarah Kim entered the command center with a thick folder of reports. She looked tired but excited. "Admiral, I think I've figured out how to prevent this from happening again." Chen looked up from casualty reports. The human fleet had won the battle, but at a cost. 7 ships were destroyed, and over 300 crew members had died saving strangers. What did you learn from the prisoners? The Vorthak aren't evil, they're desperate. Their homeworld has 12 billion people on a planet that can only support 8 billion. They've been conquering other worlds because they literally have no choice. It's expand or starve. That explains their motivation. But it doesn't solve the problem. Kim pulled out star charts and planetary surveys. Actually, it might. Admiral, what if I told you there are over 40 worlds in Vorthak space that could support large populations, but every other species in the galaxy considers them uninhabitable? I'd ask what's wrong with those worlds. Extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, high radiation, unstable geology. Basically, they're a lot like Earth was when humans first evolved. Admiral Chen stared at the charts. You're suggesting we help the Vorthak colonize Deathworlds? I'm suggesting we teach them how to live on worlds that don't require conquering peaceful neighbors. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years. It was a crazy idea, but Chen had learned that human ideas often sounded crazy to other species. She called a meeting with her senior officers and the Zalari leadership. Elder Zethka attended the meeting despite his injuries from the bombardment. He listened carefully as Dr. Kim explained her proposal. You want to help the people who tried to kill us? He asked. We want to help them find a way to survive without killing anyone, Kim replied. Your people are healers and teachers. Wouldn't you rather cure the disease than just treat the symptoms? Captain Torres was skeptical. Doctor, these Vorthak have been conquering worlds for centuries. You think they'll just give up because we offer them some empty planets? Not empty planets, Captain. Worlds that seem impossible to inhabit, unless you're a species that evolved to handle impossible conditions. Kim brought up detailed surveys of several worlds in Vorthak space. This one has surface temperatures of 200 degrees Celsius and an atmosphere that's 60% sulfur compounds. This one experiences radiation storms that would kill most aliens in hours. This one has gravity 3 times Earth normal and earthquakes every few days. Torres looked at the data and started to smile. Okay, I see where you're going with this. Those conditions would be challenging for humans, but not impossible. Exactly. And if we can live there, we can teach the Vorthak to live there too. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. What you're proposing is the largest terraforming project in galactic history. It would take decades and cost billions. The alternative is watching the Vorthak Empire continue conquering worlds until someone eventually destroys them completely. How much would that war cost? Elder Zethka spoke up. My people would support this plan. We believe in healing rather than hurting, even when we have been hurt ourselves. Chen made her decision. Dr. Kim, I want you to work with Commander Thask Vor and see if he'll cooperate. If the Vorthak are willing to try this approach, we'll make it work. The meeting with Thask Vor took place in the medical bay of the captured Vorthak flagship. The commander was recovering from wounds received in the battle, but he was conscious and alert. Commander, Kim began, I want to show you something that might interest your people. She displayed images of human colonies on worlds throughout human space. Mining stations on airless moons, cities in the clouds of gas giants, underground settlements on planets with poisonous atmospheres. These are human settlements, she explained. We live in places that most species consider impossible to colonize. Thask Vor studied the images with growing interest. Your people can survive in such environments. Not just survive, thrive. We've been doing it for centuries. And we think we could teach your people to do the same thing. Why would you help us? We are your enemies. Kim pulled up a chair and sat down beside the wounded Vorthak commander. Because being enemies is wasteful. You need living space for your people. We know how to make uninhabitable worlds livable. Working together makes more sense than fighting. Over the next several days, Kim worked with Vorthak scientists and engineers who had been captured during the battle. She was amazed by their technical knowledge and their eagerness to learn new approaches to old problems. The breakthrough came when young Vorthak engineer Keith Moore worked alongside human specialist Commander Jensen to design atmospheric processors for high-temperature worlds. Your people, Kethmore said in wonder. You don't just adapt to harsh environments. You make harsh environments work for you. That's the secret to being a successful Deathworlder, Jensen replied. Don't fight the planet, make the planet fight for you. Word of the cooperation spread through both fleets. Human and Vorthak crew members began working together on technical projects. The language barriers were difficult, but engineering problems had a universal logic that transcended species differences. Captain Torres watched human and Vorthak engineers collaborating on shield improvements and shook his head in amazement. 3 weeks ago, these people were trying to kill each other. Now they're sharing technology. That's what happens when you solve the real problem, instead of just fighting the symptoms, replied Dr. Kim. The first test of the Deathworld colonization program took place on Xerion Prime, a world in Vorthak space that was considered completely uninhabitable. The planet's surface temperature averaged 180 degrees Celsius, with sulfur storms that could strip flesh from bones. Commander Jensen led a joint human Vorthak expedition to establish the first settlement. The team included environmental engineers, atmospheric processors, and survival experts from both species. Remember, Jensen told the mixed crew as their ship approached the hostile planet, this world is trying to kill us. Our job is to make it work for us instead. The Vorthak crew members were nervous but determined. For them, this was hope, the possibility that their children might have homes without taking them from other species. The landing was rough. Xerion Prime's atmosphere was thick with sulfur compounds and acid rain. The temperature was hot enough to melt lead. Most species would have turned around immediately. Instead, Jensen's team set up base camp and got to work. They used human-designed atmospheric processors to create breathable air inside sealed habitats. They adapted Vorthak mineral extraction technology to harvest resources from the hostile environment. They built geothermal power systems that turned the planet's dangerous heat into useful energy. Most importantly, they proved it could be done. Within 6 months, the Xerion Prime colony had a population of 5,000, mixed crews of humans, Vorthak, and even some Zalari volunteers who wanted to help with the project. The settlement was thriving in conditions that would have killed most galactic species. The success of Xerion Prime caught the attention of the entire galaxy. Other species sent observers to study what they were calling the human approach to impossible problems. Ambassador Kenth Var of the Altarian delegation arrived at Xerion Prime and could hardly believe what he saw. The colony had gardens growing food in toxic soil, factories producing useful goods from poisonous minerals, and children playing in parks protected by atmospheric domes. This is remarkable, he told Commander Jensen. How do you make it look so easy? Jensen laughed. Easy? Ambassador, we lose an average of 3 life support systems per day to equipment failures. Half our crops die from contamination. The weather tries to kill us every time we go outside. Then how do you succeed? Because we expect things to go wrong, so we plan for it. Most species give up when conditions get difficult. Humans get more creative. The success at Xerion Prime led to rapid expansion of the program. Within a year, 17 Deathworld colonies had been established in Vorthak space. Each world housed thousands of Vorthak families who no longer needed to conquer other planets to survive. But the most important change was cultural. Working alongside humans had taught the Vorthak that there were alternatives to conquest. Young Vorthak engineers began proposing trade agreements instead of invasion plans. Vorthak scientists started collaborating with researchers from dozens of species. War Commander Thask Vor, now calling himself Engineer Thask Vor, led the transformation of his people's military into a construction and terraforming force. Instead of building weapons to destroy worlds, they built tools to make worlds livable. My people spent centuries believing that survival required taking from others, he explained to Dr. Kim during one of their regular meetings. You humans taught us that survival could mean creating instead of destroying. The Galactic Council watched these developments with amazement and growing respect. The human approach to conflict resolution was unlike anything they had seen before. Identify the root cause of problems, address practical needs. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chen's fleet first answered the Zalari cry for help. The galaxy would never be the same. On Zalari Prime, the capital city had been completely rebuilt. Human engineers had worked with Zalari architects to create something better than what existed before the Vorthak attack. The new buildings were stronger, more beautiful, and designed to house both species comfortably. Elder Zethka stood in his new office, looking out at a plaza where human children played alongside young Zalari. The scene would have been impossible to imagine just months ago. Dr. Wright, he said to his human colleague, I still find it hard to believe how much has changed. Dr. James Wright, Earth's leading expert on galactic anthropology, smiled as he watched the children playing. Change happens fast when people start working together instead of against each other. Together, They were establishing the Galactic Peacekeeping Academy, a joint training facility where diplomats and negotiators from across known space learned what was becoming known as the human approach to conflict resolution. The Academy's first lesson was simple but revolutionary. Most conflicts weren't about good versus evil. They were about unmet needs and poor communication. Fix the needs, improve the communication, and former enemies could become allies. The Academy's first graduating class included representatives from 43 different species. They had learned to identify root causes of conflicts, address practical problems, and build sustainable solutions instead of just punishing aggression. Ambassador Kenthvar of the Altarians was among the graduates. He had arrived 6 months ago expecting to study human military tactics. Instead, he had learned something far more valuable. The humans call it aggressive empathy, he explained to his home government during a video call. They attack problems the same way other species attack enemies, with total commitment and creative thinking. Has it been effective? Asked his superior. Kenthvar looked around the Academy's main hall where former enemies now worked together on joint projects. The Vorthak Empire has been transformed into a peaceful federation. 17 worlds that were previously uninhabitable now support thriving colonies. 3 major interstellar conflicts have been resolved without a single battle. I would say it's been very effective. The transformation of the Vorthak had been the most dramatic success story. War Commander Thaskvor, now calling himself Engineer Thaskvor, had become the first alien officer in the Terran Deathworld Corps. He stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizons, studying sensor readings from their latest discovery, a planet with crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and constant volcanic activity. Perfect, he said with satisfaction. This world will support at least 50,000 colonists once we establish the proper infrastructure. His human partner, Commander Sarah Martinez, looked at the readings and whistled. That's a tough one even by our standards. Gravity's 4 times Earth normal, and those volcanic emissions. My people are stronger than humans. Thaskvor replied. We can handle the gravity. Your people are better with hostile atmospheres. Together, we can make it work. This was the 17th successful Deathworld colony they had established. Each one housed thousands of beings who might otherwise have been displaced by war or resource conflicts. The Terran Deathworld Corps had become one of the galaxy's most respected organizations. They specialized in making the impossible possible, turning worlds that everyone else had written off into thriving communities. But their real achievement was cultural. Working together on deadly worlds had taught dozens of species that they were stronger as allies than as enemies. On Earth, President Martinez reviewed reports from across human space with amazement. Recruitment for the Galactic Response Fleet was at record levels. Young humans were volunteering not just to fight, but to heal, build, and explore. General Morrison, she asked her military chief, "What's our current deployment status?" "We have active peacekeeping missions in 12 systems. Admiral Chen is investigating a potential conflict in the Rigel sector, and we have 17 Deathworld colonization projects underway. Oh, and the Galactic Council has formally requested that we establish a permanent mediation service." President Martinez shook her head in wonder. "A year ago, we were a minor species that most of the galaxy ignored. Now they're asking us to referee their disputes. It turns out that being willing to die for strangers is a fairly rare trait in the galaxy," Morrison replied. "Most species will fight for their own people, but they won't risk their lives for aliens they've never met. Humans do it automatically. Is that really what makes us different? That and our ability to see solutions where others see only problems. Most species look at a world with poison air and crushing gravity and see a wasteland. Humans see a fixer-upper. The proof of humanity's changing role could be seen throughout the galaxy. The Kepler Accords, signed by representatives of 59 species, had established new principles for interstellar conflict resolution based on the human model. Instead of traditional conquest or punishment, the Accords emphasized understanding root causes, addressing practical needs, and building sustainable relationships between former enemies. The results spoke for themselves. Galactic conflicts were at their lowest level in recorded history. Trade between species was increasing rapidly. Scientific cooperation had led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Dr. Sarah Kim had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Relations, and spent her time traveling between worlds, studying how different cultures were adapting to the new galactic order. Her latest report made fascinating reading. Human influence has created what xenobiologists are calling cooperative evolution. Species that previously competed for resources are now collaborating to create resources instead. Most dramatic example was the former Vorthak Empire, now called the Vorthak Collective. Instead of conquering worlds, they were building them. Their expertise in large-scale engineering, combined with human experience in hostile environments, had made previously impossible projects routine. But perhaps the most important change was happening on the individual level. Children from dozens of species were growing up together on the Deathworld colonies, learning that differences between species were interesting rather than threatening. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Terran Guardian II, reading the latest batch of requests for assistance. The communications board showed incoming signals from across the galaxy, species asking for help with everything from territorial disputes to natural disasters. Admiral called Communications Officer Vasquez, who had been promoted to Chief Communications Coordinator. We're getting a priority signal from the Andromeda sector. Some kind of first contact situation that's gone wrong. What kind of wrong? Two newly discovered species encountered each other and immediately started fighting. Neither side speaks any known languages, and they're both asking for mediators who can help them communicate. Chen smiled. First contact mediation was becoming one of humanity's specialties. They had discovered that their experience dealing with Earth's many different cultures gave them advantages in communicating with truly alien mindsets. Prep. The diplomatic team and tell Dr. Kim we're heading for Andromeda. Looks like we have another situation that needs the human touch. As the fleet prepared for departure, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that day when Elena Vasquez first detected the Zalari distress signal. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or traitors, but as problem solvers. They were the species other civilizations called when situations seemed impossible. More importantly, they had proven that strength didn't come from superior weapons or advanced technology. It came from willingness to help others, even at personal cost. The transformation wasn't limited to military or diplomatic achievements. Human colonies throughout the galaxy had become centers of innovation and cooperation. Cities where multiple species lived and worked together, sharing knowledge and creating solutions to problems that had puzzled individual civilizations for centuries. On New Geneva, a joint human Vorthak-Zalari research station, scientists were developing new forms of medicine that combined Zalari healing knowledge with Vorthak engineering and human adaptability. On Zerion Prime, the first successful Deathworld colony, children from 12 different species attended schools together and played games that their parents could never have imagined. On Earth itself, alien exchange students were learning about human culture while teaching their own traditions to fascinated human audiences. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that survival of the fittest didn't mean survival of the strongest. It meant survival of the most adaptable, the most cooperative, the most willing to change. Humans, with their Deathworld background and instinctive empathy for strangers, had become the galaxy's teachers in a new kind of evolution, one based on cooperation rather than competition. As Admiral Chen's fleet jumped to hyperspace toward their next crisis, she opened a channel to all ships. Fleet command to all vessels, she announced. We're heading to another situation where people need help. I know you're tired and I know some of you miss home, but remember why we do this work. She paused, looking out at the stars that now represented not empty space,